Hello, everybody. Welcome to International Podcast Day 2020. This is the start of an amazing celebration, an amazing event featuring 60 podcasters from 26 different countries. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This broadcast, we have the amazing Danielle Desir joining us to talk about building your own PR or be your own PR, how to organize a podcast tour. Danielle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me. This has been on my bucket list for like 2 years. So
Awesome.
I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. This is what I got in the mail yesterday from
Oh, I'm sure.
PodCon 20
Yes.
speaker. You and Lee were gracious enough to invite me and 4 other podcast event organizers in there. So I wanted to say thank you for this. And if you're a podcaster and not attending PodThon, make sure you connect with Danielle and make sure you follow PodThon throughout the year. Great event. I really enjoyed it. 2 great days of material and information from so many great voices in the podcasting space.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. I know Lee's watching, so she'll be enthusiastic. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, I love the koala. Just love him. Or her. I'm not sure. Well, Danielle, I am going to get out of your way and really looking forward to your contributions to International Podcast Day.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Let's do it. All right, everyone. Welcome. Today, we're going to be talking all about podcast tour, the benefits, what you should know, and how it has helped me organically grow my audience. So I'm going to just make sure we're in full screen mode and then we can get started. All right. So in this talk, we're going to cover 4 primary things. Number 1, how to organize your own podcast tour, how to find the right podcast that fit your mission, vision, and values, what to include in a pitch email, as well as the resources that you can use to save a lot of time in the process. So a little bit about me. My name is Danielle Desir. I am the creator of the Thought Card podcast, an affordable travel and personal finance podcast. I am also the founder of Women of Color Podcasters, a community of over 3,700 women worldwide, over 50 countries at this point. And that community is dedicated to amplifying the voices of women of color in the podcasting industry. Now, when it comes to organizing my own podcast tour, how did this come about? How did I figure out that this would be a gold mine opportunity for me to market my show? So I wanted to actually replicate what I saw authors were doing in a book tour. They were going around the country, visiting all these different bookstores. And I was just releasing my first book, my first published book. And I wanted to do something similar, but I had no budget. So I said, let me just replicate what they're doing, but in a virtual podcast setting. So that is just to give you a visual of what that looks like. So it's literally going around to different podcasts and sharing your information, sharing your knowledge. But to give you guys some tangible data, because I'm all about data and making sure that we're really spending our time, doing the right things and making sure we have a good ROI, I decided to take a break from my podcast. So I had about 40 episodes out at the time and I was feeling burnout. So I took a seasonal break. And during that 4-month time frame, I decided that I would go on 12 podcasts in that 4-month time frame. And that became like my goal of mine. And in actually those 12, I was actually able to secure a spot on my favorite podcast, the one that inspired me to get started. So for me, I felt like that was a win. Secondly, because I was on break, I really wanted to really A/B test this. Like, does this strategy really work? So I actually did not promote my podcast at all. So I did no promotion at all, no social media announcements, no retweeting, nothing at all. And I wanted to just, again, see what the results would be by going on tour. So no promotion and no promotion to my existing audience. Now, what I did find, I found so many benefits of organizing my own tour, but one of the biggest benefits I saw monetization-wise is that I was able to create this evergreen sales funnel. Because I was being featured on all of these different podcasts, I was actually generating sales passively. And till this day, about 2 years later, I'm still making money from some of these podcasts that I was a featured guest on, just because of how the tour works. So again, again, these are high level things about me, as well as some of the success that I found by organizing my own podcast tour. So, what is a podcast tour? A podcast tour is simply a series of interviews on different podcasts to promote dot dot dot. So I want you to think about, what are you going to promote as you go on a tour? There's also important things for you to think about as well, is that most podcasters, they love collaborating with other podcasters, right? However, they don't have a strategy behind their collaborations. When I'm doing my podcast tour, I have a definitive strategy, and I actually have it time bound. And we're going to talk about why you want to really go on a series of podcasts in a short period of time to really get your name out there, versus kind of doing one-off interviews, unless you have something really big that you're promoting. So again, a podcast tour is simply going on a series of interviews to promote something or for a particular goal. Now, here's some of the benefits that I found from going on tour. Number one, it has helped me grow my audience. As I mentioned before, I had taken a 4-month podcasting break, no promotion. And during that time, I was able to still have amassed 7,000 podcast downloads, no promotion at all. So if you're one of those people that's like, you know what, I just kind of want to relax and take it easy, like this could be a good strategy that you use for a certain amount of time, and you can still continuously grow your audience. So I saw an increase of 7,000 downloads, again, no promotion. I've also seen my social media followers have increased. Based off of my audience, it seems that whenever I'm a featured guest on a podcast, people will gravitate towards my Instagram. So I've been able to see my Instagram grow tremendously. And after every interview, I do see a bump in my downloads, as well as a bump in my metrics online as well. So that was really good. Secondly, I think that the podcast tour is beneficial to you because it will help to build your brand awareness. This is going to allow you to get yourself out there in a way that, social media can't. I found that it helps you to build know, like, trust really quickly. In a matter of 30 minutes to an hour, this new audience can fall in love with you. They can see you as an expert. And the reason why they see you as an expert is because the host is pretty much vetting you and saying, hey, I trust this person. So let's talk to them. Let's chat with them. Let's glean some insights from them. So getting their stamp of approval is definitely a benefit of going on tour really, really quickly. Also, if you're someone like me who's pretty shy, or, so I have pretty hard of a time expanding my network. So going on tour, pitching podcasters, collaborating with podcasters from time to time allows me to get in front of more people, to expand my network and collaborate with folks. Now, the podcast touring also helps to position you as an expert. By you coming on a show and delivering value and really, really wowing their audience, again, you're going to build that know, like, trust very, very quickly. And then secondly, that host is giving you that stamp of approval, letting their audience know, like, listen, this person is legit. They know what they're talking about. They're a professional. They can totally help you. Now, the secret that I found to going on tour is that when I was able to go on, let's say 10 shows in a very short amount of time, I realized that most hosts that were interviewing me had a lot of similar questions. So I was able to say, okay, what are the top questions that hosts are asking me? And I actually converted those topics into new books. So at the time of this recording, I'm at book number 4, and that's based off of questions that I get asked over and over and over again. So it allows you also to repurpose your content. So yes, I definitely listen back to all the episodes I was featured in. I take notes. I try to repurpose it into blog posts or repurpose it into books. So there's a lot of content on the table that you may be missing out on based off your own interviews. So definitely something to consider. And lastly, promoting your products and your services. Usually at the end of each of the interviews, your host will ask you, what would you like to talk about? What are you promoting? What are you working on right now? And I would talk about my products, talk about my services, talk about my books, where you can get it. So this can really allow you to, again, create this evergreen sales funnel, this machine that's working in the background without you ever, having to do any more work besides that one-time interview. Now, if you do not have a product or service to pitch the audience at the end, you can still funnel them to a web page and capture their email address and give them like a freebie or something, a downloadable, a checklist or something like that. So it could still help you to grow your audience. So I would say, based off this presentation, pick one of the areas that you want to focus on. Do you want to use this to help build your profile as an expert in your niche? Do you want to help you build your audience or promote your products and service? Any of these options are totally doable. And I've seen lots of success in all of these 4 spheres. Okay, now back to the numbers. So I'm going to share some pretty personal information, but the day I launched my podcast, the Thought Card Podcast, I had 34 downloads. And let me tell you, I was so excited that anyone would listen to my show. I'm very proud of that. So I had 34 downloads that day. Now, when I took a break from the podcast and I went on, this 4-month hiatus, I was going on a summer to travel. That day I had 112 podcast downloads that single day. Now, I took a 4-month break. I went to travel the world. Again, I'm a travel podcaster, so that made sense. When I came back, that first episode for season 2, I had 500 downloads that day. So from someone who had about 100 episodes on average, how was I able to grow to 500 without doing any promotion, without doing anything from my brand outward facing? All of this happened because I have gone on a series of podcast interviews, again, a podcast tour. So once I discovered this and I started to track these stats, I said, you know what? I am just going to stick to this. So now I'm actually on season 4. And I take seasonal breaks. And during my seasonal breaks, I kind of step away from production of my podcast and I go on tours. I actually do 2 different tours. I do a winter tour, which is usually January and February. It's a smaller tour. And then I do a summer tour for 4 months. And that's my larger tour. And we're going to talk about things to consider when you are going on tour. So for me, tracking the success of my tours has been instrumental. And again, no promotion. I did absolutely nothing. And I made, 5 times the downloads by not doing the traditional marketing that you see a lot of folks talk about in the podcasting industry.
Hey, real quick, Danielle, can I jump in? Did you want to activate your screen share?
Yes. Is it not showing you?
No, it's not showing.
Oh no.
Yeah. So go ahead and put that in, and then I can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I know you were talking. I didn't want people to miss the slides. So.
Oh, okay. There we go. And I'm looking at the slides too. Okay. How about now? Do you see it now?
There we go.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me go back to the graphs just to give you guys that visual. I think this visual was important. So, are we good? We're good. Okay, we're good. Okay, perfect. So yes. So again, this is the visual of what I was looking at before. Day 1, again, 34. Taking a break, I was at 112. And then when I got back, I was already at 500, again, without any type of promotion at all. Okay, so let's talk about the tactics when it comes to organizing your podcast tour. The first thing I would recommend is for you to set goals. Again, I think that most podcasters, when they're collaborating with others, they just collaborate without being strategic. But the way I like to think about it is, again, we're going on a series of podcasts in a very short amount of time. So 2-3 months. So one of the first questions I ask myself is, how many podcasts do I want to go on? When I first started my podcast tours, I had a goal of hitting 10 podcasts. So that was my goal. Also, how long do you want your tour to last? We're not going to make a tour that is 6 months long because, again, you want the compounding of a short period of time. It's kind of like a blitz, right? You want really to hit the road hard and being in a lot of different places at one time. So for me, I decided that 4 months was going to work for me. Again, in the wintertime, I do about 2 months. You could even do 1 month or even a couple weeks. So really set that time parameter. How many episodes, how many podcasts you want to be on, and also how long do you want this tour to last? The other thing to think about when it comes to the time frame is that especially if you are producing your own show while you're going on tour, you're going to be you're going to be tired, right? You're going to be producing your own show and also being an interviewee as well. So thinking about, making sure that this tour is doable in a shorter amount of time, will allow you to have bandwidth for other projects that you may have in your life. Also, and this is, I think, so important, what are the outcomes of going on tour? What do you want to get out of this? For me, I wanted to grow my audience. I wanted to promote my new book. I wanted to meet new podcasters. And I made sure that was very, very clear. And once you have all these goals set, you'll be able to implement your strategy, and you'll be, again, able to just measure your success better than just not having goals at all. So again, how many podcasts, what's the time frame, and also what are the outcomes? What do you want to come out of this, and how will you know that it was successful for you? Okay. Now, the other question that you may have is how to find the right podcast for your message. Great, Danielle. This is a great marketing strategy. Now, how do I actually do it? The first thing I recommend is to start with the shows that you love in your niche. Again, you are familiar with these shows, you love these shows, maybe even shows and hosts that you admire. So start there. Start with what you're familiar with. One of the things that I highly recommend to do is to read the show descriptions. The show descriptions are flooded with tons of keywords, which we're going to actually walk you through how to find these keywords in a moment. But you want to make sure you're reading these descriptions to make sure that you are a right fit. Whatever your outcome is that you had planned out with your goals, you want to make sure that that outcome is possible with the shows that you're going to be pitching and trying to be a guest on. So reading those show descriptions is a step that I highly, highly recommend. And also, when you're looking at a podcast that potentially you want to collaborate and pitch to, also looking at their past 10 episodes. Number one, does this podcast, is it even active? There's so many inactive podcasts, and you don't want to spend time working on a pitch that's not going to go anywhere because the podcast is inactive. Does the podcast even accept guests? If they have a solo cast, then there's no point in pitching them as well. So making sure that you're taking a look at the last 10 episodes will really help you to make sure that you're spending the time really pitching the right shows and not shows that may not be a good fit or that may not be active at this time. When it comes to the show description, there are a couple of things that I recommend to look for. So number one, can you fit the narrative? Every podcast show description will tell you what that podcast is about. And I want you to imagine in your story, when you decide to pitch them and when you're going to be a guest on their show, can you fit the narrative? Can you fit seamlessly in this show? If it's not a good fit, then most likely it's going to be a moot point because your pitch is not going to get accepted and it's a waste of time, right? So what you want to do is really hone down, read the descriptions and see, can I fit in this narrative? Secondly, you want to think about what kind of value are you going to be able to provide to this audience. It's not only about taking, right? You're not only taking from this audience, but you're also giving as well. So make sure that you can provide exceptional value, and the whole fit discussion is going to play into that. So that's two of the things that I think are really important when it comes to show description. Again, I'll show you exactly how to do that in a moment. When you're looking at the episodes that you want to review, you want to know, again, have they covered your topic before? So for me, as a travel podcaster, I get a lot of the same pitches, but I don't think that people realize that I'm actually looking for out of the box stories about travel and money. So when you're looking at their past episodes, really think about, have they covered this topic before? If they have, especially recently, they may not cover that topic again. Okay, so really look for somewhere that you can stand out, but it's still a good fit for your audience. And then also think about, can you offer a new perspective? So even if they have touched on your topic, can you offer something new? I'm always looking for opportunities to wow this new audience that I'm going to be introduced to. Because I want them to, be wowed and then potentially follow me and potentially listen to my podcast, potentially buy my products as well. So making sure that you can offer a brand new, fresh perspective and that they haven't covered your topic in the last, 10 episodes is a good starting point. Okay, so here's the description. We're going to actually read this description together, and I'm going to point out to you key words. In the meantime, in this presentation, if there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll make sure at the end that Dave will read them out to me so I can make sure to answer your questions. But when I'm talking about key words, these are like the words that stand out to you. And it's the words that are mentioned in the podcast description that you're going to actually lift off the page. And the reason why this is important is because you want to show the host that you understand their show, you understand their mission, their vision, and their values. And what best way than to use the terms that they've used in their podcast description. So when I'm reading a description, I'm always looking for what are those words that stand out to me. Secondly, how can I fit this narrative? Thirdly, how can I offer something new or perspective? When I'm a guest, how can I really wow them? And it all starts with the description, and it all starts with the keywords. So we're going to read this paragraph together, and I'm also going to, do some stops and highlight those keywords. So this is actually a show, No Debt, No Problem podcast that I saw. I read a description and I was like, this is perfect, right? This is perfect for me. I talk about travel. I talk about money, and I paid off $63,000 student loan debt. So I knew that this was the show for me. But here's how I found those keywords. So let's read it together. So Mary A. Wheeler is a student loan strategist based in Houston, Texas. Her mission is helping individuals kick student loan debt and begin to live their financial lives in abundance. So number one, student loan debt. She's talking about the topic that I know really well. So I said, okay, check mark student loan. That makes sense. The No Debt, No Problem show discusses debt, money, and triumph while delivering real life events and stories that are meant to empower listeners as they embark upon their own financial journey, one episode at a time. So keywords for me, that's like, alert. Yes, these are words that I know I'm going to be a good fit for. Was discusses debt, money, and triumph. So again, having student loan debt, paying off my debt. I can talk about that transformation. Let's keep on reading. Learn how to eliminate debt and position yourself to build wealth through proven strategies and best practices. So empowering listeners, real life events and stories, proven strategies and best practices. This was made for me. I have a perfect story that fits her narrative. I have a debt story. I had debt and I paid it off. So I knew that once I pitched her, she would most likely say yes. And sprinkled throughout my pitch email, I made sure to include, life events and stories or proven strategies or best practices or any variation of those, again, to let her know that I understand where you're coming from. I understand what you're looking for. And here's why I'm going to be a good fit for you. Okay, here's another example of a show that I ended up pitching and I actually got accepted. So let's read it together very briefly. So this is the Worth Listening podcast by Lauren Williams. Certified financial planner and four-time Olympian, Lauren Williams leads in-depth conversations with guests, having them share what she calls their money memoirs to offer insights into how money works in their sport or profession, as well as sharing important lessons they've learned along the way. Again, for me, important lessons learned. I have lessons learned about money. I'm going to be a really good fit for her. Also, she's looking for stories, money memoirs. That to me was like a keyword that I had to find somehow to put it into that email, and offering insights. I have insights. I can be a good fit. Now, when you read this, what stood out to me is that she mentioned that she's looking for how money works in their sport or profession. She's a four-time Olympian. By just solely reading her description, I would say, she's kind of for me, but she's kind of not, because I'm not a sports person. I'm not an athlete. I'm not a professional. I'm just a regular person who paid off debt. However, I was a listener of her show. So I've listened to her shows before, and her call to actions are always, hey, if you have a fun or interesting money memoir, definitely, let me know, hit me up and be a guest on my show. So she was looking not only for sports and people in the professionals, but they're also regular people But I would not have known that if I just looked at the description. So yes, I want you to look at the description. That will give you a lot of clues, but you have to understand that sometimes these descriptions are outdated. Sometimes they're old. If you can think back to your last time you looked at your description, maybe your show has rebranded since then, right? So it's a good place to start, but that's why I recommend going back and looking at their last 10 episodes. And if you can, listen to a couple of episodes to see what it sounds like. And maybe they might have some call to actions that are a little bit different from what you see there on paper. Okay. So now that we have kind of, started finding shows, how do you find more shows, right? Where's the best place to start? So number one, I recommend starting with like something that's simple. If you have Apple Podcast and you start at your podcast, so pretty much open your app, start at your podcast, scroll all the way down to the bottom. And Apple Podcast has this really nifty section called You Might Also Like. So it's really pretty much recommending you to other people. So you're going to see a row of podcasts down there. And that's where I start. I looked at my show, I go all the way down to the bottom, and I look at all the things that Apple Podcasts is recommending. That algorithm is matching you up to all different types of shows in your niche. So why not start there in addition to starting at the podcast that you love in your niche as well. But I found that Apple Podcast is a great time saver. And honestly, I just pretty much, once I find one podcast, I just kind of go back, scroll all the way down to the bottom and kind of just go, down and down the rabbit hole until I find shows that are a good fit for me. So Apple Podcasts could be a really interesting gold mine for that. You can also ask your audience for recommendations on social media. If you are really big into Twitter, Twitter is perfect for this. I can ask my Twitter people, recommend me to something and people will chime in. So making sure that, your audience knows that, yes, I'm available for interviews on social media could be a really good place. You might find people that are just waiting for you to collaborate. So that's a good place. Thirdly, I would say Podchaser. Podchaser is fantastic if you have a specific person in mind. And here's how I'm going to share that with you in one moment. So here's an example of the Apple Podcast. So again, when I went to my podcast, the Thought Card Podcast, I scrolled all the way down. These were the recommendations. These are all travel podcasters. So I just, again, went to the description. I looked at their pretty much the last episodes. Can I fit in this narrative? Great. I already had a starting point. However, for Podchaser, what I love about Podchaser is that if you have a particular person in mind, this does a lot of the heavy lifting searching for you. So on the left-hand side, we see results for Gabby Beckford. So Gabby Beckford, a dear friend of mine, she is a Gen Z travel influencer. So I wanted to take a peek to see what shows have she been on, because even though we serve different audiences, we're still in that fin savvy, like travel savvy audience. So I knew that if I can find the shows that she's been on, maybe I can find some synergy for me. So I typed in her name, Gabby Beckford, and these two episodes came up. So I was able to see the topics that she discussed right there, how to win $70,000 in scholarships with Gabby Beckford. Again, for me, it's different, but it's very similar. We still talk about travel and money. So maybe I can reach out to this podcast outside the bubble and pitch them. Also, episode 20 here, Diary of a 20-something, she talked about taking risks, solo travel. Potentially, there may be some synergy there. So use Podchaser if you have a specific person in mind. Usually I try to think about the person who is like in my niche, someone who is relevant, someone who I have a lot in common with. So that is really helpful. Another search result to the right is Terry Igioma. Terry Igioma, she has a fantastic trade and travel brand, and she teaches folks how to invest. So again, it's adjacent to what I do. I don't teach people how to trade and travel, but we talk about money and travel. So why not? So I typed her name in. And she came up on these 2 different podcasts. Again, this gives me a starting point. What other influencers are doing in your niche, and see what they're doing. And potentially you may be able to go and be a collaborator with those podcasts as well. So those are some hacks. So firstly, Apple Podcasts. Secondly, Podchaser is really good. Ask social media, like on social media, share that you're going on tour, share that you want to collaborate with more podcasters. You may be able to get some people who show your interest there. Okay, we're moving right along. So now that you've established, like you have the shows that are kind of, interesting, that are piquing your interest, it's time to get organized. The thing about podcast tours is that you most likely will have to pitch more shows than you actually are going to end up being on. Because again, some of those hosts may not reach out back to you. They may not reply, or things might not just pan out. So you want to reach out to more podcasts than your goal number. So if that's being said, you may be reaching out to 10, 15 or 20 if you want to get on 10 shows. So how do you get organized? Number one, recommend creating a tracking log. So you can do that easily with an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets. And in this tracking log, you're going to have a couple of key things that you can include. You want to keep it simple and not too overwhelming. And this is what I do personally. So I have the podcast name, the podcast host. I also have links to the podcast website. So again, in this spreadsheet, I can just click on a link and go directly to the show that I'm looking at. Also, you want to capture their email address. And if I can, I usually maybe put a blurb of the show description. So this pitch list at a glance will let you know, the shows that you have on your list, and just helps you to be organized. Secondly, you want to include the pitch date. Once you send out a pitch, you want to keep track of that. You want to have the pitch date there. Also the status. So maybe the status could be, waiting for a reply. Next steps also. Maybe it's, using a Calendly and booking a call with them, or anything that could happen when it comes to being a guest. So this again is for me is my one-stop shop to keep myself organized. At a glance, I know exactly the shows that I'm thinking about pitching, where they are on the process, and potentially the next steps. Okay, now that we're organized, it's time to, get pen to paper or fingertips to your typewriter or your keyboard, and it's time to send out pitches. And I'm going to show you actually an example of a real life pitch that I sent out. So we'll be able to put these concepts into practice. So firstly, in your pitch email, the pitch email is really an introduction. It's a soft introduction, letting this potential host know that, hey, I see you. And based off of your interest and your podcast, here are some topics, here are some ideas, and how I can be of value and be of service to your audience. It's not a hard sell. It's a very soft introduction. So at a minimum, if it's not a good time right now, they at least know your name or know your show or know something about you. And maybe in the future, they may hit you up. So when I like to introduce my pitch emails, I always start with who I am. So you want to mention, who are you? In this section, you want to talk about your platform. So mention your podcast with the links to your podcast. Also, you want to also mention your story highlights based on the show description. So for example, going back to that, the no debt, no problem, my story highlights are based off debt, right? I can talk about so many different things, but I want to zero in on what the topic at hand is based on their show. So you want to definitely talk about you, but in the context of their show, which is why the keyword exercise that we talked about is essential. And really the description is essential. Secondly, you want to talk about what you can talk about. What value can you bring to the table? And I don't necessarily like to just say what I can do. I want to show them I can do by bringing up 1 or 2 topics that I can discuss. The whole point of this pitch is not only to be an introduction, but it's also for you to do as much work for the host as possible. You want to make sure that they read this email and they're like, yup, absolutely. They thought through everything I could think about. I have very little questions or no questions at all. And this is a no-brainer. Let's get this person on the show. If you are not including enough information in your pitch, your host is going to get frustrated. They're not going to want to go back and forth with you. and they may not even answer you. So that may be an automatic no. Whenever I'm thinking about sending out pitches, I think about, as a podcaster, what are the kind of email pitches that I like to receive? I want to get as much information, especially if it's a cold pitch. I have no idea who this person is. So I need to get all this information right now before I even spend more time thinking about the show. So you want to give and provide them 1 to 2 examples of what you can talk about. I also like to go above and beyond here by providing examples of my work. So if I say that I paid off all this debt, I'm actually going to link back to some articles that I've written, or I may link back to a podcast episode. But here's a caveat. There's a reason why I like actually blog posts better when I'm sharing my examples of my work, is because blog posts are skimmable. If a podcast host doesn't have a lot of time, they're not going to listen to a 15, 30, 40, an hour, minute episode. However, they may have a minute to skim a blog post. And when I talk about skim, it's usually the headline. So all the headlines will let them know what this blog post is about. So the kind of examples that I like to provide in my pitch emails are all blog content. Again, it's skimmable and it's easy. You can also provide podcast trailers. So maybe you create a small 1 to 2 minute clip about your topic and you send that out to all of your potential hosts. Or if you have YouTube, if you're a YouTuber, you have videos, you can potentially send them the YouTube clip. But for me, I think social proof and proof that you're an expert is so much better than just only giving examples. You want to give examples. You want to give examples of the topics you talk about and also examples of your work. So blog posts have been super beneficial. Now, you may be saying, Danielle, I'm a podcaster. I don't have a blog. How do I do that? So there are, in terms of tools, you can actually post for free on LinkedIn. So you can write an article on LinkedIn and then share that LinkedIn blog article in your emails. You can also use Medium. Medium is a free platform as well. You can write an article and you can share your Medium link in this pitch email. These are the 2 places that are free. If you already have a podcast website, it may make sense for you to create some pillar content. So when I say pillar content, that means based off your brand, what are the 3 to 4 things that you come back to on a constant, consistent basis? What are the content pillars that you come back to and that you can talk about and riff off endlessly? And that's a great place to start. So if you're not really sure what kind of content to create, if you want to start a blog or write an article, think about, okay, based off of what I'm going to be pitching to these hosts, let me reverse here and think about, okay, based off those topics, let me write those topics again to show people that, yes, I do know what I'm talking about. And I found that the blogs are better because they're skimmable. And again, if a podcast host doesn't have time, they can just spend a minute or 2 just looking at your article really briefly. Okay. If you have any questions about this particular, I would be happy to answer. Usually people have questions about the examples. Okay. All right. So here's an example pitch that I send out, and we're going to go through the 3 different areas that are critical. So, hi, Wendy. My name is Danielle Desir, and I'm the creator of the thought card. I bolded the thought card because this is a link. You want to make sure, again, the whole point of this pitch is to be a soft intro and to give your host enough information. You do not want them to be highlighting this text and then putting it into Google. That's just too many steps. So you want to link to your platform. So that's a link. An affordable travel blog and podcast. Since I have 2 different platforms, I have a blog and podcast, I included links there as well. Empowering people to make informed financial decisions, travel more, pay off debt, and build wealth. So this entire first paragraph is about me. It's letting them know that I have a podcast. These are my content pillars, the things I talk about endlessly. And that is the about section. In the second paragraph, I talk about just high level. I talk about the debt that I paid off. I talk about purchasing a home. I talk about traveling. And I also mentioned that I would love to be a guest on your show and share the strategies, most likely a keyword used in their description, that I have used to pay off my student loan debt 6 years ahead of schedule, all while traveling the world. So these are story highlights based off of the value I can provide. I'm going to tell your audience exactly how I did it. I'm going to share with them exactly how, and that is very critical. And you're also painting a picture here. You're telling them your highlights, but based off of the things that are interesting to them. In closing, I say, here are some of my articles which your audience might find insightful. So this is just further reading for them, but it's also social proof for me. Like, yep, I know what I'm talking about. And here's examples. So links to paying off my student loans and also sacrifices I made. I link those 2 articles out and I say, thank you for your consideration. So it is short and sweet, but I truly believe that when a podcast host reads this email, they know exactly the kind of angles we're gonna be talking about. This is very easy. Based on, again, highlights, I give them plenty of links back to my own platform, and I give them examples as well. So that is an example pitch. Now, what I did not have here, I did not have the examples of the episode topics, right? So what you could add here is episode topics, but even then, in the story highlights, I give them lots of ideas again of what we can potentially go with. There's about 3 different topics that we can talk about there. Okay. Now, I know we've discussed a lot of different things here, but what I want you to focus on is that this is not about you. It is, but it's not about you when you're sending out pitches and going on tour. It's really about the value that you can bring and in this collaboration and being introduced to this new audience. When I am going on tour, of course, there are going to be benefits, right? But the benefits only come if you serve your audience, this new audience, as best as you could. So it is about you, but technically it's not, because it's all about this audiences that you're serving. And in this pitch email that you're sending out to these hosts, you want to make sure that, yes, they have to know who you are, but you also want to say, yes, here's how I can benefit your audience. Here's what they can learn from me. Here's how I can help them. Here's how I can get them from point A to point B. So again, it's about you, but technically it's not really about you. So through your story, through your journey, how can you help their audience? That is the frame of mind that is most successful. Okay. Now, you pitch them, you landed a spot in their guest chair, everything went well, the interview was published. Now, what do you do after? Firstly, you definitely want to update your tracking log. You want to mention like just a couple of things just to keep you organized, but when did the episode release? Episode title, and link back to the episode. A lot of people have show notes on their website. So again, this offers just a skimmable way that you can always go back and keep track. The only reason why I know I have been on 65 plus podcasts is because I have a tracking log, and I can go back to each and every episode and, click a link and it'll take me directly back to that episode. So organization is key when you're creating this tour. What you can also do is you can also add these episode links to a press page, which I highly recommend doing. So a press page is really a page on your website where you've been featured on publications, in the news, and also podcasts. So this allows not only your audience to see where you've been featured, but also potential brands to see where you've been featured. A lot of brands love having podcasters as brand ambassadors, because they know that if they're attached to me and I love their product or service and I'm going to go on tour, they're going to be potentially mentioned on like all these different places if it's a good fit, right? So this is a great example. A press page is a great example of all the places that you've been. And it just, again, keeps you organized. But this one is more outwardly. The spreadsheet is just kind of you personally. Make sure that you share in your newsletter, you share in your social media platforms. You can even create a pin on Pinterest. Yes, you can create a pin on Pinterest and link back to that host's website. If you go to my Instagram profile at the Thought Card, a lot of my Instagram posts are all of my features. It's like whenever someone whenever I've been a featured guest, I'm sharing it on my Instagram. I'm sharing it on social media. And you know what? That signal boosts, that lets people know Danielle is here to play. Danielle is here to collaborate. Danielle is, she is willing to be a guest. She's willing to provide value. She's willing to help. So it's really important to not only, do all these things and be on all these podcasts, but also to share as much as possible so that you can, again, continue to collaborate with more people down the road. Okay. Best practices. So closing remarks are my best practices is announce that you're going on tour. The good thing about podcast tours, when I first started, I had to pitch every podcast I wanted to be on because my network was very small. But at this point, what I do is I just pretty much announce, I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to be going on a tour, and anyone looking for, a guest that talks about travel and money. And you'll be surprised by how many people, because they've been seeing you like out there in the world and just, collaborating with so many people, they're going to be interested in collaborating with you. So announce that you're going on tour. Do not keep this a secret. Let people know. Similar to authors, when they're going on a book tour, they put it on their website. They mention all the places that you can meet them. So you want to make sure that people know what you're doing. Also, do not get discouraged if you hear crickets, because initially you're not going to know if your pitch is the right fit. And the only way that you're going to know if your pitch lands is if you continuously pitch, continuously send out collaboration requests and see what happens. Especially when I first started, whenever I got a yes, I'm like, yep, that's the email that I'm going to use as my baseline. That's going to be my template from now on. And in all transparency, I do have a template like I shared before. However, it still takes me about 20 to 30 minutes to craft a pitch to each podcast I want to pitch to, because it's not only about, having a template. It's again, going to the description, understanding what the vision of this host is, seeing if I'm a good fit, coming up with episode topics for them. These are all things that takes time. So do not get discouraged if you hear crickets. Keep pushing. And maybe a call to action for you after this session is that we're all here looking at the session together. If you know of any other podcasters, why don't you send them your pitch and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think about this pitch? Is this something that you would be interested in? Would you say yes? Am I missing anything? Or do you have any question marks? Am I putting too much information in this? So collaborate with your friends in the industry and just ask for feedback. That could be something that can save you a lot of time. Again, like I mentioned, even though I have a template and I've been doing this for 2 years, I still spend about 20 to 30 minutes on each of the pitches. Because again, I want to nail it. I want them to say yes. And it cannot be, I don't want it to be off mark at all. Okay. My last tip when it comes to best practices for you, utilize Facebook groups. So here are 2 examples. So in my Facebook group, WC Podcasters, the first of every month, we have collaboration threads. So if you are looking to either have guests on your show or be a guest on other people's shows, this is the thread that you should be looking at. So look at these Facebook collaboration threads and kind of comb through the list and see, is there any opportunities, and reach out to them. And the great thing about utilizing Facebook groups is that you don't usually have to send out a long, lengthy pitch. It's a very usually casual. It's like, hey, this is what I'm about. Would this be interesting to you? And the host is like, yeah, reach out to me via email. And you don't even have to have this whole big dialogue that we just created. So it could save you a lot of time by using Facebook groups. Secondly, She Podcast on Tuesdays. Every Tuesday, they have this Pitch It Tuesdays. And that's a great opportunity to, again, see what other podcasts are looking for and how you could fit in that conversation. So those are 2 examples. I know this is like women-based, but these are 2 examples that regularly show up. And again, these Facebook groups can help you save a lot of time because you don't have to send out that formal pitch letter that we had talked about. Okay, so as a freebie, if you're interested, I have a guest pitch checklist that you can go ahead and download, and it's going to tell you 5 more things to look for when you are actually thinking about, this podcast looks like a good one that I can pitch, but this 5-step checklist will definitely share with you more things to look at besides just the descriptions. That is a freebie for you. Okay, so that is it for my presentation today. Again, my name is Danielle Desir. I'm over at the Thought Card podcast. It was wonderful, and I think we have about 12 minutes, so I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions. Okay. All right.
Hey, Danielle, thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that was amazing. So many actionable items. And I just love the way that you've been able to incorporate and sort of kind of work your way through that entire process. And just in case people, I know there was a couple slides that didn't get incorporated. Is there a way we can share that or have it on your website or something that we can share with our audience later?
Absolutely. I can send you the PDF and everyone can have a copy. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because I know there's a little bit of technical issue on my side that I with the screen share, but I'm not seeing. I'm scrolling through the chat now. Just a lot of positive comments right now from 34 to 500 listens. Wow, congrats. This is fantastic. This is such helpful example, or this is such a helpful example. Thank you so much. Lee says pure gold. Thank you. This is really great. One question in there that actually just popped up was, when you hear crickets, how long before you follow up on a pitch?
Okay. So at Podthon, actually, one of the speakers, Bree, had mentioned that she follows up a quarter later. So 3 to 4 months later. And to me, I'm like, wow, that is gold, because a lot of podcasters, they're not looking for guests right now because they batch record or they batch work. So they may be already ahead of the game. So I would say 3 to 4 months after your first pitch is a good time, because they may be in a new season. They may have more time, more capacity. So maybe between 3 to 4 months, I think is a good opportunity. Because if it's a no at 2 weeks, when you follow up, it's going to be a no. It's going to be a no. It's too soon. So give yourself a couple of months before sending out your next pitch, which I think is really helpful.
Perfect. And do you give thank you presents?
Ooh, do I give thank you presents?
It's a really interesting question. There's a lot of people that are guests and hosts that this always comes up, and there's always a unique answer from everybody. So I'd really interested to hear your comments.
So I don't give thank you presents, but I always ask if they'll be interested in free copies of my book to give away or for themselves, because my books are ebooks. So it's super easy for me to send out. So that would be a great place to start. But if you have swag and you want to send that out, that's awesome. I would definitely, something I should think about for sure.
Well, I know I'm owner of one of your books, your most recent release. So I haven't tapped into it because I was planning this event, but really looking forward to getting that. And that's a really great idea. If you have previously published information or swag or shirts or anything like that, that is something easy that a lot of people hold on to, whether it's stickers or buttons or whatever, that could easily supplement just as a thank you.
And if you have synergy with that host, you may even ask them like, hey, would you want to be on my podcast as well? So you could do a podcast swap, or you can even actually intro them. So in your intro, you can mention their podcast as well. A lot of podcast listeners are always looking for more podcasts. So why not mention them? Mention people you're collaborating with. So that could be a small gift that could just keep on giving way after that interview or that recording.
Awesome. And one final question is, was there a time when an interview went south? And if so, do you have any tips for us?
I wouldn't say an interview goes south, because mostly the ones that I'm pitching, I'm actually giving them topics. So the topics that I am presenting in the pitches are the ones that I'm most confident in. And if there's any topic, let's say within the realm of the conversation that you're not comfortable with, like, let them know. If you don't feel comfortable with disclosing salary, just let them know so that it doesn't even come up and it's not like an awkward thing. But I haven't encountered any of that. I would say that I'm very more selective now. Before, I was just like 10, any 10, like, doesn't matter. I just want to hit my 10 number. And some of the quality of those podcasts weren't that great because I wasn't listening to them. I wasn't doing the techniques we talked about today. So that is something to be very mindful of. So even if you have a goal of hitting a lot of podcasts, make sure that those podcasts are like quality, because you're associating your brand with them as well. So make sure that you're going to be happy with the output of that.
Well, Danielle, I want to thank you so much for taking part of International Podcast Day. I love that we've connected. I'm so glad to have your voice represented on this presentation and this broadcast. You provide so much for the podcast community, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And don't forget, you can head over to check out Danielle over on our website, or you can also follow her on social media at The Thought Card. So Danielle, once again, thank you so much for taking part in International Podcast Day 2020.
Woohoo! Let's celebrate. Woohoo! Yes.